date is December 6th, 2023, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are flocking in droves to their local tournament stores, all in order to get their hands on one thing: the Fire King Structure Deck Reloaded. I myself walked out of my 5 to 10 job, immediately walking to my locals right after it opened, and picked up 3 of the structure deck myself just to make some videos on it, and it's really not hard to see why, because Konami has actually given us a really powerful structure deck yet again. Fire King has been given so many tools and appreciation out of this structure deck, enough so to make it actually a very viable deck. And it's even caught my attention enough to where I'll be doing something similar like I did to the Trap Trick structure deck when it came out. That being a 3-time structure deck profile, a regular deck profile, and maybe even a combo tutorial if the deck profile gets enough likes. And so what better way to start off than with the triple structure deck profile? I'll be taking this time to basically kind of cater it to a lot of newer players or returning players for the game, by explaining a lot of the cards and what they do and how they interact with each other, alongside a list that you can build using just around $38 US after tax, and maybe even see some competitive success at a place like your locals. With that being said, let's get right into my triple structure deck profile for the Fire King Structure Deck Reloaded. Starting off, of course, with the main deck, and as always, I will have the full deck list up in a sidebar for those that are a bit too busy to fully keep track of what's going on the screen, or for those that have issues reading the card text. But starting off, we have 3 copies of Sacred Fire King Garunix, 3 copies of Fire King High Avatar Kirin, and 1 copy of Fire King High Avatar Garunix for the high-level Fire King monsters. As I mentioned in the intro, I will be breaking down some of what these cards do for those that don't know quite exactly how they work yet. So Sacred Fire King Garunix is one of the brand new cards out of the structure deck. It is a level 8 winged beast with very large stats that are exactly the same as the original Fire King Avatar Garunix. And it says if your monster or monsters whose original attribute is fire is destroyed by Battle Arc card effect, you can special summon it from your hand or graveyard, regardless of if it was there when the destruction happened, and if it's normal or special summoned, you can destroy 1 Fire Beast, Beast Warrior, or Wing Beast from your hand, deck, or face-up field, and if you do, it gains that monster's attack that it had when it was like in that location. So if it had boosted attack on the field, it'll keep that boosted attack until the end of the turn. This card is by far the best extender in the deck. You can utilize it with a bunch of your different destruction effects, as that is how the Fire King archetype works. It utilizes destruction by card effect in order to fuel its plays and start off its combos and stuff. Plus, it has plenty of ways to put this card in the graveyard to make its effect still live, and it's really good on turns 2 and 3 when you're trying to get back into your engine, especially if you get your board broken if you went first. It serves as both a free massive body to hit the board for stuff like Xyz fodder, and also helps you extend even deeper into your plays by destroying a Fire Beast, Beast Warrior, or Wing Beast from anywhere, and all of the Fire Kings except for one of the extra deck cards is one of these types, and so you don't have to worry about like certain stuff conflicting with the deck. The other new high-level monster coming out of this structure deck is Fire King High Avatar Kirin, to go along with Fire King Avatar Kirin and coincide with the High Avatar Garunix. And it says during the main phase, if this card is in your hand, quick effect, you can destroy 1 fire monster in your hand or face-up field, and if you do, special summon this card. Also, if it's destroyed, you can special summon 1 Fire King monster from your hand or graveyard except another copy of Kirin, and then you can optionally destroy 1 card on the field. This is non-targeting. So Kirin serves less as an extender in the sense of Garunix in that it gets you further into your engine, but more so serves as an extender through disruption. Kirin is an absolutely amazing card at dodging cards like Infinite Impermanence, which is a popular card coming out of the structure deck, or any sort of targeting removal that would otherwise stop your stuff from going on. There's a very important level 1 starter card in this deck, and so if it gets hit by something like Infinite Impermanence, Effect Failure, or anything otherwise that would stop it, you can utilize Kirin to not only continue to resolve that effect, but also swap out your lower powered monster for a much higher powered one. On top of this, if it's destroyed, you're not only getting more extension from your hand or graveyard by summoning something such as a High Avatar Garunix or anything else that you might need, but you can also break the board apart even further than what you already are with this deck by getting a free non-targeting destruction as well, which you can also actually use on your own things in order to actually continue your plays by popping one of your own Fire King cards. Kirin is another very powerful card coming out of the structure deck. I am very excited to see how it plays around with all the different removal effects and different negations, because Kirin just being a hand trap can fuel so much. Finally, there's not too much to talk about with the High Avatar Garunix. It is a classic card for Fire King after all, being able to basically just dark hole the entire board if it's destroyed and it comes back during the next standby, and the battle destruction effect isn't really relevant. You mainly just play it in the triple structure deck profile because it is another very large level 8 body that you can also use to just completely nuke the board. Very, very good in combination with Kieran because this is an aggressive going second variant of the deck, and so if your opponent goes first, you can use Kieran, pop the high Avatar Garunix in your hand to special the Kieran on board, and then next turn your opponent has to deal with the Avatar Garunix coming back and just nuking the board if they don't have a negate for it. For the lower level Fire King monsters, or I should say the level 4s, we have 2 copies of the brand new Fire King Avatar Rangbali. I'm sorry if I pronounced any of these names wrong. 2 copies of Fire King Avatar Arvada, who was a newer card for Fire King but not out of the structure deck, and 3 copies of Fire King Avatar Barong. Rangbali is another new card coming out of the structure deck that says if a face-up Fire King monster you control is destroyed by card effect, you can special summon it from your hand, and you can negate the activation of a spell or trap card by destroying one other fire monster in your hand or face-up field. Rangbali is just a free level 4 Beast Warrior extender in the deck that you can search off of Tenki. Just helps you get another body on board and get very, very aggressive, but it also gives you an option to actually play going first should your opponent force you to, or if you feel like it's a deck where you'll struggle a bit going second. Arvada is similar to Rangbali in that it's a monster negate instead of a spell and trap negate, but instead of being a special summon monster, you can actually use its effect on destruction to special summon a fire, a Beast Warrior, or a Wing Beast from your hand or graveyard, but its effects are negated, and it destroys during the end phase. Finally, Barong simply says it has the same summoning condition as Rangbali, but it also says if it's destroyed by battle or card effect, during the next standby phase you get to search any Fire King card from your deck to your hand. Fire King Avatar Barong has the same summoning condition as Rangbali, but on top of that says if it's destroyed by card effect, you can add any Fire King card from your deck to your hand during the next standby phase, and that actually is a mandatory effect, like a lot of the Fire King effects are. A lot of the level 4s serve as either extenders or disruption, but Barong especially is really good for digging for your resources on turns 2 and 3, an amazing card for follow-up, especially because you can destroy it with things like the Sacred Fire King Garunix. To round off the Fire King monsters in the deck, of course we have to include 3 copies of the brand new legendary Fire King Ponix. This card is insane. Basically, it's a level 1 Wing Beast with 500 attack and 200 defense, and while its stats are small, its effects are very, very large. It says if your monster whose original attribute is fire is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon it from your hand, and if this card is normal or special summon, you can add 1 Fire King spell or trap from your deck to your hand. And on top of that, it says the next standby phase after this card was destroyed and sent to the graveyard, add it back to your hand for free. Basically, Ponix does it all, because Ponix is going to be searching your very important new Fire King Sanctuary coming out of the structure deck that grabs your Fire King Island. On top of that, it is a free extender on top of being a starter because it can summon itself if a card is destroyed, which you're basically going to be destroying everything in this deck. And it adds itself back to the hand during the next standby phase, so you can do it all again and play even more aggressively if you couldn't already go for the kill. Basically, Ponix is absolutely the best card in the entire deck, and you're going to be starting a lot of your plays with the Ponix especially. That is it for the Fire Kings, but the structure deck also did come up with some awesome going second fire monsters, such as Dogoron the Mad Flame Kaiju, which is really good at removing pesky monsters that would otherwise be a problem, such as Appaloosa Bow of the Goddess, in case you have no other ways to play around it. And also, we did get access to Blaster, Dragon Ruler of Infernos, for the first time in ages after it came back off the ban list, and so what a perfect set to put it back in. Blaster's effect when it's banished isn't really going to be coming up in this deck, but the destruction effect by pitching another fire monster is definitely going to be awesome for breaking boards, especially because you are going second, and a free massive body that you can special summon by banishing fires that you don't really need in your hand or graveyard is also really, really appreciated. One of the awesome things about this structure deck is that we actually got 2 of the greatest hand traps of all time reprinted as low rarities in this deck. Those, of course, being 3 copies of Droll in Lockbird and 3 copies of Common Infinite Impermanence. These cards are very, very strong in any deck, but they're really good in this deck in particular because the Droll in Lockbird is really good at ending opponents' turns immediately, depending on the matchup, things like Menadium, for example, in this current format, and so that'll make it even easier when you go second and try to break apart what little your opponent gets to make, and of course try and go for the OTK. Imperm is not amazing at just completely ending turns, but Imperm is really good as a going first or going second card because you can use it as a hand trap, but you can also use it to break apart boards going second, again to out things like Appaloosa or any other multi-disruption threats. As I keep mentioning, this is a going second deck, and what better card to include then than the archetypal Onslaught of the Fire Kings. So what this card does is it says if only your opponent controls a monster, special summon one Fire Beast, Beast Warrior, or Wing Beast monster from your deck, but it has its effects negated and is destroyed during the end phase, and you can only use one Onslaught per turn. So this card seems pretty weird to a lot of people. You're probably wondering, like, why would you want to summon a monster with its effects negated and destroyed during the end phase? That doesn't really do too much for you, right? Well, Onslaught actually does a lot, especially for a going second variant of the deck, or a deck that needs resources in order to destroy and trigger other effects. So yes, you can't just use this to summon a free Ponix from deck and get a search, right? But what you can do is you can summon something from your deck that you can pop off something like your Fire King Avatar Kirin, or as we mentioned in a little bit, the Fire King Island card, or basically any other effect that would pop, and trigger other effects like the Sacred Fire King Garunix, as well as the effect of whatever you popped. Remember that you can use things like Barong or Ponix on the standby phase of the next turn in order to get it back or search for any Fire King card. And when push comes to shove, this is a going second deck, so you can just simply use this to summon a very large body like the Fire King High Avatar Garunix or the Sacred Fire King Garunix, and get those plays going a little bit early, or just get a really big beat stick on your board, even if its effects are negated. And in the case of something like the Sacred Fire King Garunix, you can get it in graveyard to trigger its effect later, or the High Avatar Garunix, you can actually trigger it during the standby phase when it gets destroyed during the end phase to nuke the board again if you somehow couldn't go for the OTK. I probably explained it very poorly, but TLDR, Onslaught of the Fire Kings does a lot more than a lot of people might give it credit for. Just because the effects are negated does not mean that the monster you're summoning will get you 0 value. Some cards that will help get that monster value are, of course, Circle of the Fire Kings, which we play at 1, and the brand new Fire King Skyburn. Both of these are quick play spells, with Circle of the Fire Kings being a classic Fire King card that says target one fire monster you control and one in your graveyard, pop the one on field, and special summon the one from your grave. This is another amazing way that the deck has to dodge cards like Infinite Impermanence, and also get more of their plays going while putting things like the Sacred Fire King Garunix or the Ponix in grave to trigger the effects later. And you know what's funny? I never actually noticed until now, but Ponix was insinuated in this card's artwork ages ago. That's actually adorable. And of course, Fire King Skyburn, as I mentioned, is a brand new card out of the structure deck that targets any number of Fire King monsters you control and the same amount of cards your opponent controls and destroys them, but it also has an effect in the graveyard saying that you can protect a Fire King card from being destroyed by banishing it instead. So the second effect isn't really going to be coming up, especially because this is a 1 effect per turn for some reason, but the first effect is very, very great. Because not only can you use this to break boards going second, especially by popping things like cards that you summoned off the Onslaught of the Fire Kings, but you can also use it to dodge Imperm, and when you're going first, you can use it as a disruption. With the cards out of the structure deck, this deck is now very, very great at swarming the board, and so you can potentially get anywhere from 3 to 4 pops, really depending on the situation, which is great in case you go first. Of course, going second, you'd rather keep the monsters for other things, of course, but this can be really, really good to pop, again, cards like Appaloosa, or anything else that would give you trouble on an end board. To wrap up the Fire King spells, we have, of course, 2 copies of the brand new Fire King Sanctuary, and also 2 copies of Fire King Island in order to go along with it. Fire King Sanctuary is a continuous spell out of the structure deck that says when this card is activated, you can immediately place a Fire King Island directly from your deck face up in your field spell zone. If a card in your field zone would be destroyed by card effect, you can destroy one fire monster in your hand or face up field instead. And if your opponent special summons a monster or monsters, you can immediately after this effect resolves, Xyz summon one Fire Xyz monster from your extra deck using only Fire King monsters you control. Much like Fire King Ponix, this card absolutely does it all. It gets your Fire King Island directly from your deck for you, which is huge because Island is such a good card for the archetype. It also protects the island to prevent that nasty floating effect that the card has that we'll get to in just a moment. And of course, the effect to Xyz summon is amazing, especially because it's an amazing disruption going first when your opponent wants to make a board and you can summon the brand new Xyz monster to just completely nuke the entire board. Fire King Island is essentially like a Dragonic Diagram, which for those of you that don't know, basically just means that it destroys a monster in your hand or field in order to search for another card of the archetype, though it does also have a second effect saying that if you control no monsters, you can special a Fire Wing Beast from your hand, which not really going to come up all the time until the new card comes out, at least the new Fire King Wing Beast monster. But it also has a really nasty effect saying that if it's destroyed or banished while in the field zone, you actually have to destroy all monsters you control, which sounds okay in theory because you're playing a bunch of Fire Kings that are float, but if your opponent's going second and destroys this and you lose your entire board, that's not very great. This is exactly why Sanctuary having its protection effect is so important, because yes, while you do have to get rid of a monster in order to actually utilize it, it's better one monster from your hand or field than just your entire field, period. While the other cards are nice, of course, this is the main card you will be searching off of the Fire King Ponix in order to get your plays going, especially the Fire King Island. Fire Kings do consist of Beast, Beast Warrior, and Winged Beast, which is why it's so nice of the deck to come with 3 copies of Fire Formation Tenki, or it comes with 1, but we're playing 3 because we bought 3. This is just here to search cards like your Arvada, your Rungbali, and of course your Barong, but it becomes even better if you play a build like Tri-Brigade, which I will have a video coming up on tomorrow. But the extra 100 additional attack can actually come up in a lot of situations when you have cards like your Rungbali or Barong on the field after they special summon themselves. To finish off the spells, we are going second, and this is a deck that actually doesn't mind some of its stuff being destroyed from time to time, and so we are playing 3 copies of Dark Hole. Really, really good at breaking apart boards. If your opponent doesn't have a spell or trap negate, it's basically just over for them, and if they do, you can at least bait it out with this before you activate a card like your Fire King Sanctuary or Island. Very classic card, but old does not mean bad. And to wrap up the main deck, we have 1 copy of the brand new Echelon, I think it's Echelon, of the Fire Kings. So this card is a bit interesting, especially as it is a trap card in a going second based deck. But it says special summon 3 fire monsters, 1 beast, 1 beast warrior, and 1 wing beast, each from your hand, deck, and graveyard, but their effects are negated and they're destroyed during the end phase. Now, this effect isn't amazing unless you're using it in combination with something like your Sanctuary of the Fire Kings or your Skyburn to get additional bodies on board for the pop effect and to trigger the effects of the things that you pop later, but the good part of the card, in my opinion, comes from the second effect, because it says you can banish this card from your graveyard to make your opponent unable to activate cards or effects when your Fire King monsters are special summoned this turn. So this is actually really good because unlike Skyburn, it's not a 1 effect per turn, it's just each effect once per turn. So you can actually use the first effect of this card if you go first to summon 3 monsters, including like 2 level 8s, and then banish it from your graveyard to give you protection whenever you summon something. And then when you use your effect of your Sky Sanctuary in order to go into your Xyz monster and try to nuke the board, your opponent can't do anything like use a Forbidden Droplet, Infinite Impermanence, or anything like that in order to negate it. Or even if you want, say you Brick going first and you have to use this card defensively, you can utilize the effect on your turn going second, or on turn 3 I guess I should say, to make your opponent unable to use any of their disruptions or negates whenever you summon something, especially cards like Ponix that you really would like to have resolved. Overall, the deck is at 41 cards, and this card is definitely very cuttable if you so choose, but I kind of wanted to include all of the new cards out of the structure deck, and I think that this card definitely has its uses, especially in a triple structure deck profile. Now, moving on to the extra deck, there isn't like a whole lot to say here because they only give you like 4 extra deck cards, and most of them aren't really great. But because there are so few, we basically just end up maxing out on all of them. Of course, 3 copies of Heat of the Fire Charmer Ablaze. Card's really good, especially in a format where decks like Rescue Ace and stuff are dominating, but on her own without cards like Nightmare Unicorn or SP Little Knight, it doesn't really do a whole lot. Coach King Giant Trainer is literally only ever good going first as a burn card in order to win in time. It just burns 800 and lets you draw a card, but it prevents you from attacking, so that's not really great. And Diamond Direwolf isn't like the worst card ever, but it's definitely showing its age. Like, this card was good in hat format back in 2014. It's not so great in 2023, but at least you can get a pretty decent trigger of your floating effects by popping something else other than itself. Now, the real star of the deck, though, is, of course, the brand new Garunix Eternity Hyang, I think it's Hyang, of the Fire Kings. Again, very sorry if I mispronounced that. It is a rank 8 Pyro, the only one that falls out of the scheme of being a Beast Warrior or Wing Beast, sorry. It has 3,000 attack and 2,000 defense that requires 2 or more level 8 monsters. It says if this card is Xyz summoned, you can destroy all other monsters on the field. Also, during your turn, you can detach a material from this card to destroy 1 spell or trap on the field, and of course, if it's destroyed, you can special summon Fire King monsters from your graveyard up to the number of materials that it had when it was destroyed. Now, let me tell you, this card is absolutely insane, and it's so easy to access. Between cards like your Sacred Fire King Garunix and Kieran, you're going to be able to get this card out very frequently. And while of course it's very good going second when you want to go for a game, especially when your opponent has a mixture of monsters and back row, it's also really good when you go first because of course remember that Fire King Sanctuary lets you Xyz summon on your opponent's turn if they special summon a monster. So you can time this perfectly by having 2 level 8s on board, including like your Kieran, by popping a card to special itself, triggering your Sacred Fire King or Runics engraved to special itself back, and then when your opponent summons a monster, boom, you get to Xyz summon into this card, nuke everything on the board, which can trigger your effects during the next standby phase, and you kinda just explode all over the place. It's such a good card, and even if your opponent manages to get rid of it, you can special summon cards back like Ponix or anything else that would get you more advantage, or even just some very large monsters that your opponent might have trouble getting rid of afterwards. All in all, this card is such a great support card for the archetype after all these years. Definitely a bit curious that they made it a pyro instead of sticking with the whole mechanic, and also that they actually gave them an extra deck card instead of another main deck boss monster, but I am very, very content with how it turned out. And that is going to be it for the extra deck, but this structure deck came with so many fantastic cards, it was so difficult to actually make the deck list that I made. But the cool thing is that if you make a deck list similar to this, you're actually left with a bunch of other really powerful staple cards that you can use to make something like a side deck in case you have to go first or for other matchups. For example, you get the amazing Solemn Judgment out of this structure deck. Literally negates any summon or any spell or trap card activation by paying half your life points, which isn't going to matter when your opponent's going to end up dying from your big Fire King monsters anyway. And you even have Torrential Tribute for going first. Really, really great in this deck in particular because you're nuking everything on the board, including your own monsters similar to Hyung, and so you can actually trigger their effects on top of getting rid of your opponent's monsters. Herald of the Abyss is a fantastic card in this format. Because of decks like Purely, making a massive unaffected monster, you can utilize the Herald of the Abyss to force them to get rid of it, and then just plow through the rest of their board, whatever they may have, with your Fire King engine. Alpha the Master of Beasts is another really, really powerful going second card. It falls under being a beast, has a really large amount of attack, bounces your opponent's stuff, and special summons itself back if they still have more monsters than you, and also manages to be a level 8 in case you have to go into Hyung with it. And of course, a classic for Fire King back in the day and even to now, Sacred Phoenix of Nephthys is another level 8 Wing Beast fire monster that has the same effect as Fire King High Avatar Garunix, except it destroys all spells and traps on the field as opposed to monsters. And remember that this was made using literally just 3 structure decks. Of course, you can utilize many outside cards to really, really power this structure deck up even stronger than it already is. For example, the Dogmatica engine, or at least the Nadir Servant engine, is being utilized to play around cards like Ash and Imperm. In case you get your turn stopped, you can utilize Nadir Servant to basically go into a 1-card full Fire King combo to set up Hyung on your opponent's turn. And of course, my personal favorite that I will be showcasing a deck profile for tomorrow is utilizing the Tri-Brigade engine. This engine takes advantage of all the Fire King monsters being Beast, Beast Warrior, and Wing Beast, while the Fire Kings take advantage of cards like Tri-Brigade Kit and Fractal being fire monsters. It is a very, very consistent way of turning the Fire Kings from a very aggressive going second deck into a balanced going first or second deck, and getting a lot more extension and starters than they already have. And that is going to do it for my triple structure deck profile for Fire Kings. I'm very, very excited to experiment more with this deck, and for those ready to move up into a more competitive sort of deck that uses outside cards, then definitely be sure to check out my Fire King Tri-Brigade deck profile coming out one day after this video goes up. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about Fire King after this structure deck. I think it's really cool that it's another structure deck that you can take 3 of, and maybe even see some success at your locals with it, especially when it comes to being a new or returning player. But with that being said, that's going to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like, as I'll split this video and the channel into Recommended. And if this content you more like it, like the rest of my deck profiles, then be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because it supports the channel more than anything else, and it's absolutely free. Also, if you want to support me directly while getting some awesome TCG merchandise in the process, check out Tapio cards and link down below. Use code Aurora5 for 5% off your purchase at checkout, and support me financially. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.